my privilege to introduce to you another homeschool high school graduate, Nina Hundly. She is here to share her story with us. Nina, hi and welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor
I'm
to be here.
excited to hear your story. So could you tell us a little bit about your homeschool experience as a teen? Like, what year did you graduate? What was life like for you? And where did you go after high school graduation?
Okay, well, my journey is a little lengthy, but I'll make it short. So I was homeschooled from the 4th grade on. And so high school, I ended up graduating a little early. I was 16, but it was like 2 months before I was turning 17. And so the community college is where I went first. I found that I wasn't quite sure at first what I wanted to do. And so I thought that the community college would be a good route. But as soon as I started signing up for the college, I found that I thought that I would want to do cosmetology. So it's a trade. And so I went straight into that program right at 16, getting ready to turn 17. I started the spring semester. So I graduated like December, and then
so how old, like what year was that?
2000. 2001.
All right. And the reason why I asked that question is because homeschooling looked a little different back then than it does now. And it helps the homeschool parent like visualize, like you had different challenges as a homeschooler than homeschool teens have now. So thank you for sharing that. So you went on to cosmetology, and did you finish that program?
No, I finished that program in 2001. So I was 17, getting ready to turn 18. And then I worked in a salon for about 4 years, 3 to 4 years. And during that time, I discovered that I really wanted to be a nurse. Like, I had discovered that I knew the ropes really well, and I enjoyed being able to do hair, but it just wasn't kind of my heart desire. And so it was great though, because I learned a lot about business and managing money on my own and things like that, because it was essentially my own spot, there at the salon, and I had to, get my own clients and things like that. So that was really good. And then I went to nursing school. So I went back to community college, and I started in an associate's degree program for nursing. First thing I did was take all my general courses and things like that, and then a CNA program. And I worked as a CNA while I was in the associate's degree program. And, it took a little bit of time. And then I graduated with my associate's degree, and I worked at Brenner's Children's Hospital in Winston-Salem. And then I decided I wanted to get my bachelor's degree. So I started taking classes online through UNC Wilmington. And they have kind of a program where you go, like, I think it was once a semester, you have to be on campus. So I was working, and I did that. That was early, mid-20s by that point. And then I finished that, worked a few more years, got really involved in research and just different areas of the hospital I like to teach. So I taught a few, it's called precepting, when a new nurse comes in and that kind of thing, you show them the ropes there. And then I got a lot of certifications and just enjoyed, growing in my career. And so I went to go back to school to get my graduate degree. So I did nurse practitioner. I got a master's of science in nursing at Duke University. And so I had thought about that, like, where would I want to go? And because graduate school, there's so many great programs. And I worked really hard, in my bachelor's degree program and associate's degree. So it set me up really well for Duke for grad school. So that's kind of been my long journey. And I'm still being honest. So I had some, a rough situation several years ago, and I was pregnant at the same time. And And so I decided to leave the nurse practitioner program for a little while and just rest and focus on the situations that I had going on. And so about 2 years ago, I went back to school for another course in editing. So I am now an editor for manuscripts.
Okay.
I've had a long journey.
Well, it is a long journey. And I'm just wondering, how did homeschooling help you? Like, what do you feel like was the benefits of being homeschooled that would allow you to start with one trade and move on and keep moving with your interests? What helped you do that?
I feel like with homeschool, I mean, that's your basis, you know, your background, your foundation kind of thing. So for me, it was just, I think that with my personality, it helped a lot too, but I really loved not being stifled. And, you know, some of that is my personality because clearly I've gone a couple of directions, but, you know, nursing is truly my heart, you know, and so I knew that even before I kind of went in, but I had a little bit of fear. So I chose something else, you know, that I like to do. But I feel like, you know, homeschool really is dynamic, to be quite honest. Like it's just a dynamic way of learning and it sets you up for a love of learning. And that's truly what I have. And I just think that it really, you know, set me up for success in many areas. So my husband was also homeschooled and he's
Okay.
a physician, but he was homeschooled from the time he was in second grade on. And so his homeschool experience is different from mine. And that's a personality difference too. He really likes the structure of sitting in a classroom. And I did not, you know, in those early years, but it helped me to just be, you know, I felt unstifled and I loved learning. And so therefore, you know, like when I got to college, I wasn't, you know, I had already experienced like the love of learning, you know, and so I was already to the point where I wanted to sit in the classroom and learn, you know, like I need to know all the details of these things. I do think also it helped me with critical thinking. And that was, you know, I feel like in the homeschool realm, we have the ability to teach so many different ways and so many different things, you know, according to different personalities and things like that. But, you know, there is a little bit of like what your parents kind of help you do. You know, you get your life lessons along with learning too. So there was a lot of critical thinking skills. I feel like it really helped me think well for my future. And, you know, I think that just by being homeschooled, I was able to, you know, I mean, from an early age, like from fourth grade on, you know, if I wanted to learn about, we were learning rocks, you know, and we were learning whatever, we would go outside, we would go here. And it's very similar today, I'm sure, but it was just a very unconventional way of learning. And so I think that set up that love of learning. And that's why I'm nearing 40 and still like to learn.
To learn. And that's the ultimate goal, is that we shouldn't be filling our kids' heads with a bunch of information. We should be helping them become lifelong learners. And that sounds like what your parents did for you. And so it's like, check, Mom, you did a great job. So I find it really interesting that you just made a comment like, do you think that you took the trade because you thought you weren't so sure you could make it at the college level? Was there a little bit of not too sure of yourself, or you just didn't know at that stage?
I did not know. And I think that would probably be my biggest advice. You know, one thing I guess I would, you know, love to tell parents is just that when I was growing up, we just didn't have a lot of money to do all these extracurricular things. And so I wasn't able to do the piano lessons that I really had wanted to do from a young age, or dance or ballet or any of those things that I had wanted to do. But my parents were really great about figuring out what is it that she's good at, what is it that she loves, that she's passionate about. And And, you know, when you're a teenager, I feel like you don't know. Some kids do. I mean,
Mhm.
some kids know, like from an early age, like this is what I want to do when I get older. But I do feel like sometimes it's, for me, it was not my parents who put this pressure on me, but maybe society.
Mhm.
There's this pressure of just like knowing what you want to do and figuring out your whole life's, you know, career right then when you graduate high school, and they're so young, you know. And so sometimes I think like just having the grace and the freedom to just be able to choose, if you need to switch it up, you
Yeah.
know. I think just with parents being very patient with that, and not, you know, they may not know right away what they want to do. And for me, it was that fear of just like, this is very intimidating. Can I do this? You know,
Mhm.
would I be good at it? You know, I was good at hair. I love to play, you know, but I wasn't sure, you know. And so that uncertainty, my parents were very supportive. Um, they were very supportive of just all the things I like to do. I used to love to write as a kid. And so they kind of tried to help instill, you know, like, you can do this. And so I think there's just that teenage, you've got your friends and you're just uncertain about, who do I want to be when I'm 28? You know, I don't know that now. I'm only
Yeah.
17, 18, you know, and so there's just a lot of pressure, I think, from the outside world.
Mhm.
And so I chose something that I just liked doing, you know. And I think I had several options. At the time, I knew I loved nursing. I knew I thought I would, but I was like, man, it's just so, it feels exhausting to go through that. Um, and so I just was scared, I think. And I feel like, you know, thankfully my parents were very patient and um, just allowed me to do this number a few
Yeah.
times, you know.
Yeah. And even though that you just used the phrase that you think you were scared, the fact that you picked a trade that was totally successful on your own, like to
Mhm.
be in a cosmetologist, having your own chair, finding your own clients, like you didn't rely
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. That was huge. Like that takes a lot of self-confidence just to do that.
Yeah, it
Like
was
let's not
terrifying.
dismiss that. Like you might have been scared, but you weren't scared necessarily to do that, which is
Mhm.
huge. To run your own business is
Yeah.
huge right after high school.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is like a lot of times you'll get in these programs and you don't realize like all that's involved in it. And I thought, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? Like, can I manage this? You know, but it was so wonderful for me during those years, and I do not regret it. You know, a lot of people will be like, you know, if you had to do over again, would you have gone to this? No, I would not have. I would have gone every step that I've taken, because it really does set you up for who you are. I mean, it helps you learn about, you know, what is it that I love? What is it that I love doing? I love being with people.
Mhm.
And then, you know, I get married in my 30s and I manage money really well, you know, and so it's helped me to be able to do that. And
Yeah.
um, you know, it's just like, okay, at the time, you know, when I switched, when I was like, okay, I think I need to move into nursing. Like, this is really what I'm feeling called to. Um, I didn't, that didn't feel bad. Like, I didn't feel, you know, and made me feel like, oh, well, you were supposed to do this. And,
Mhm.
you know, my parents were very supportive of just like, we're all learning and growing, and it's okay to,
That's
you know, figure
beautiful.
out what you want to do, you know. And they were, you know, they really, of course, valued education.
Mhm.
And so they were like, if you want to, you know, we'll support you.
Yeah.
And by that point I was early 20s. So that was, it doesn't end, you know, when you think high school's over, like it's, and they're going to college. It definitely didn't end for me. And so, or for my parents, like there's still so many more life lessons and just schooling things that they helped me with,
Yeah,
you know.
that's true. So Nina, you're in this lovely career, and you said you kind of had to take a step back,
Mhm.
and it sounds kind of personal. So is there something that you learned through that stage of this difficult time, and what did you do? How did you adjust? Like what what caused you to have to take a step back?
Well, my parents both actually passed away. So I am an only child, and they ended up passing away. Right, my father had passed away about a decade ago, and then my mother passed away just about 5 years ago when I was pregnant with, or right after I had my little boy. Um, and so, I feel like they're the way that they raised me and taught me with school and just with homeschool and just that life experience during those teen years really helped me to cope and handle things well with this, and just feel that hope. Just how you're daily teaching your kids and they're modeling life after you. And so just knowing their faith and knowing their experience, like, or knowing really who they were as people, really helped me have hope. And I think it kind of pushes you, or it kind of propels you to do something, like to move forward into something else. And what I mean by that is, like, I wrote a journal that is it's called Dear Tomorrow, writing, journaling your legacy today, journaling your story today. But it's essentially like a little legacy journal, because they taught me how to have a legacy so well. I felt like, I dedicated this book to my parents, but, they believed in my writing from a young age. They believed in what I wanted to do and to explore different things in life. And I wouldn't have felt like I could have done that, after they passed and different things like that. I don't think I would have felt that if I hadn't had so much of that support from them as a teenager, as a early adult, and just knowing that they believed in my writing, they believed in my future, and just different areas of life. Like they just believed in me, and so that really helped a lot too. But I did want to do something that was, and I still do, still now I think about, like, maybe an organization that helps people with something related to cancer, because that's what they both died from. But I feel like they helped me develop those skills in those teen years specifically, to be able to even think about doing something like that.
Do you feel that homeschooling gave you time to see that? Like, we don't really think about when we're homeschooling our teens, because what will they think about us in 20, 30 years?
Yes.
That time that we have with them together. So do you feel like you cherish your high school experience more because you weren't away from them, because you lost them so young?
Absolutely. I cannot even tell you, like, how much I treasured those years. They were not always easy. And I don't want to make it sound like, it's like, oh, I was so excited. But they were not always easy for my parents or for me. But that's being a teenager. And, and that's parenting teens, it's just, it's a learning process. It's a faith process too. But I treasure every minute. Those field trips that I had with my parents, that I was still doing, as a teenager, that I was still going on. And just, of course, there's a natural pull away as a teen, with certain things, but just having their, if I needed something, I could go to them. If I had a question about something, I knew they would help me get it, help me learn where to find it. Because as you say, we had dial-up.
Well, I think it's really like that conversation about becoming mature as a teenager and onboarding into adulthood. Like, you're trying to figure it out. You were their first teen that they ever experienced it with. They're learning, you're both learning together. And that's where the conflict comes in, when people aren't sure that they're making the right decision, or their different opinions of how things should go. But it sounds to me, when it came to your choices, they gave you the freedom to make those choices. So it's probably lifestyle or things that you were worried about you, and things you were trying to be more independent. And if we just sit back as parents and we look at it as a beautiful exchange of the opportunity to help our children launch into adulthood and not feel so threatened by it, we would have less conflict.
Yeah,
you know.
I do agree. And it's hard. I think it's hard as a parent, I'm a parent now, and it's just hard to.
Yeah. I had told my teens, though, a lot of times that they confuse rudeness with maturity, though.
So true. So true.
I said, it's not what you're saying is the problem. It's how you're saying it.
I was saying, oh, how many times did I hear that? Yeah. But they do, but it is a great point. Just being able to, I feel like it helped us bond well in my 20s when I still came to them for life advice, in my 20s. But they gave me, going into being a hairstylist, like I had to be able to set up my own schedule, and no one was doing that for me. And, set up my own budget and things like that they had been teaching me that maybe I had rolled my eyes about or something before. But those things,
paid off,
helped launch me into adulthood. But they did, because they gave me that freedom to just, and support, maybe they knew, like, is this really going to be her gift? Is this really what she wants to do? Maybe it's not, but she'll learn, and they allowed that. And I think that really made us closer in my 20s too, because I still wanted to hear about their opinions and their advice.
Yeah. Could you reflect on anything during your homeschool journey that you felt was kind of lacking or didn't prepare you for certain life onboarding into adulthood?
I think that's a good question. So the one thing I really struggled with in high school was algebra. And I feel like a lot of parents probably have, there's always, if you've got your English bend, they may have some struggles with math and back and forth. So and just knowing what they're good at and that kind of thing. But when I went to nursing school, you have to do all of these things. It's not just this. And so I had to take some remedial courses in math for algebra, instead of just going straight into your pre-cal and things like that. So I had dreaded it so much in high school. My mom in particular, really struggled with teaching that to me, because it was the time of, it was the 90s. And so it's just, there was a lot of ways that she was learning with me, I didn't know that at the time, but that she was trying to figure out, what's the best way to teach this if I don't understand this myself, because it was like algebra 2 and things that she just wasn't, that was just not her
But we
gift.
didn't have the same resources, because I've been homeschooling for over 30 years, right? So back in the 90s, we didn't even, we were just starting dial-up. So it's like we couldn't go and research.
Oh no, yes,
you were
there
just
was none
from
of
the
that.
community around you. What were they using?
Yeah.
You might be able to go to a conference if there was one in your state. And so she was kind of limited in her ability to find outside sources to facilitate it to somebody else.
So that was kind of my lowest area of schooling. Like, I really didn't love it, and I dreaded it so bad when I got to college. And I was kind of angry that I had to do it, because you take a placement test, when you go in, and if I had done better on that, then maybe I wouldn't have had to take this remedial course. And I ended up acing it so well, they asked me to tutor it. So that it was like a complete switch from high school to college. And I can't really figure that out, what it was. But other than, just I had that love of learning already there. Yeah. And sometimes when you're nearing the end of those high school years, you're just, let's just get this done. And I don't care about math. And, and it was just things like, well, if I do this, I'll never have to use it, but you may, and so when
do you think it became successful because you actually had a buy-in to want to learn it? Because I think that should be a conversation a lot when our kids are struggling so much. Sometimes it's not you as the parent, it's just they don't want to learn it. Yes. And until somebody has a buy-in, it's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink, kind of a thing. Do you feel it was more like, okay, I'm here at college, I need this to get to this point, I better learn it?
I absolutely agree. I was thinking, I'm not gonna be able to get my degree if I don't do this.
Yeah.
And so I did it, and I did it well. And then I found that I enjoyed it after all.
Yeah.
It's a different way of learning it. And so I found that I really enjoyed it. And then and so then I tutored it for a while. And then it was just, it was just very interesting how, I think a lot of times when you're a teenager, or when you are teaching teens, there's this limited view, because we don't know the future. And so it's like, oh, this is so frustrating. They're just not good at this. And, I'm not going to push this and that kind of thing. And you never know what they may go into and love learning later on. So just pushing through that wall.
I'm sitting here wondering about the conversation that you had when you met your husband, and you found out that he was a homeschooler and you were a homeschooler. Do you feel like, especially, I'm assuming he's around the same age as you are, and so it was kind of an identity thing to be a homeschooler back in the 90s. Like, you had to prove yourself to your family. You had to prove yourself. You went into college or any setting did you feel like you had to prove who you are or your experiences?
So I think that Caleb, my husband, did. He's about 3 years older than me. And he lived in a different state. And so, the states were very different with their rules and everything. And so I would definitely say that he felt that way. My parents were very interesting. They just were just very interesting. My mom's thinking, okay, how am I going to get some PE, some physical education in her life, because she likes to sit and write all day. And so she signed me up at the local high school for track, and, or whatever I wanted to do physical education wise. And so it ended up being track. But, she really was proactive. They never pressured me too much about things like that. So I think that helped me ask them questions about, what do you think about this?
That's beautiful.
Good idea.
Well, can I ask you a question? Because I know it's burning on everybody's mind. So you were homeschooled, your husband was homeschooled. Are you going to homeschool your children, or how's that conversation going?
When we first got married, we were I had a great experience. My husband did not. So both of us were like, yeah, we probably won't homeschool. We probably just won't do that. It's, I don't know how that would go and all of these things. And it's just, we were still in the mindset of what it was like in the 90s and the early 2000s. And so I just had no clue. But my son, he really loves to learn. And I find myself, when he's a toddler, I find myself teaching him on a little whiteboard about little letters and numbers, and having him sing songs as he's learning things, just very unconventional ways of learning. And so here we are. We are part of a co-op right now, and he's in kindergarten. So he will be in kindergarten. So he's in a preschool kindergarten co-op right now.
And so it sounds like it's going to be fun to figure out your own educational philosophy, and how you have two people coming from homeschooling worlds, one who saying they didn't like it, and another one that said, my parents were about educational reform, and melding that together and I think you guys will probably have to have a lot more conversations of what education looks like in your home versus parents who are both coming from public school or both coming from private school. I think you guys are headed for a lot of conversations, but they're going to be fun conversations, because it's going to be like, what does school look like? What does education look like in our home?
Yes.
And how, and it doesn't have to look like our parents. It has to look like what we want. And that's beautiful, as all of us should be doing, because I think it's really important to realize that none of us are homeschooling the same way.
Right.
And if you're really in tune to your children, each of your children should have their own educational experience. Right. And so as those more children come along, you were saying that earlier, that you're seeing with your friends navigating a couple of different children.
And my
And
child, he is already the opposite of me in so many ways. And it's just, again, it's that learning experience for me too. So
yeah,
like,
and what's interesting with my oldest, she read at 3. She could say the alphabet forwards and backwards at 3. I thought it was how I was homeschooling her that was creating this child who could read. And then my next child come along and they can't read until he was 12. And so, I was thinking it was homeschooling, but I quickly learned it was about the child and had nothing to do with me, and so that's going to be fun.
I think my parents grasped that concept of stewarding well, and that's what I want to do. I just want to instill a love of learning for my child and not have a bunch of pressure or expectations of him, but just how does he like to learn, and what is his personality like, and how does that fit into his passions and things. So, I really want to steward him well.
Good. Can I just circle right back to this conversation that your husband's experience wasn't that great? I would just like to add that considering the time back in the 90s, you had alluded to this, that every state had different requirements. I'm homeschooling. I've always homeschooled in the state of Illinois. It has always been a very homeschool friendly state. We didn't have mandatory testing. We didn't have this burden to prove anything to the state. I don't know if that was your husband's experience, considering the state that he was in, but sometimes those outsized pressures, especially during the 90s, really dictated the experience that somebody was going to have in their home, which is crazy that here, I could be cross country homeschooling and having so much more freedom. And so, not going too much into his story because he's not here to tell it, but is that maybe part of the process of why homeschooling didn't go so well for him?
Maybe part of it. I do think that, as parents too, looking at how your child learns versus it has to look this way and it has to be this way. And this is what it's supposed to look like. That taking that off the table would probably have really helped him because, but he will talk about so many positive experiences even today. And he loves learning. He's constantly learning also, because in his career now, like you have to constantly be doing, continuing education. And so, they went across the country and did a few things, but, parents do hold a lot of weight with that, which is how they individualize, like you were saying, the individualize, like understanding who your child is as an individual versus this is what it looks like on paper, and how the things that we've seen in the conferences that they have to do this and they have to look like that. And I just am really impressed with parents today because I'm opened up to this new world of homeschool with my child. And I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. Parents are amazing in how they are so, that dynamic word is truly there again. There's just so many teens I've seen that just come out and they're just so, they are so self-confident and just owning their, and I relate to that so well, of just like, come on out there, you've got this, and take it to the top, wherever you want to go. Like, you want to do this, take it to the top of that. You want to do that, and they just, I feel like parents have just done a really great job of just exploring a lot of options and individualizing, learning to their child.
Yeah, that's important. That's an important topic to me, is that, I started homeschooling in the 90s. It was about educational reform. Yeah. And that's what I'm hoping with the conference, is that it will spur people to hear your story and to hear other homeschool graduates' stories, to really allow some more child-led learning and follow that path, because it's so rewarding. I know box curriculums have their place. There are tools. but they're not the all be to all ends, right? They're just a tool, and we can use them to our advantage.
Yeah.
And so, but I do appreciate the time that we've been having this conversation, and I really do appreciate it. And thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your story with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.